Okay, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to demystify that little S in HTTPS and explore the totally invisible rules that keep your daily web browsing safe. If you've ever wondered how the internet actually protects your most private information, well, you're absolutely in the right place. I want to start off by asking you a question that honestly we rarely stop to think about. When you type in a password for your bank account, or you punch in a credit card number and hit enter, how does it actually reach the server? I mean, it seems effortless, right? You hit a button and boom, within seconds, your transaction is approved or you're logged into your account. But behind the scenes, your browser and the server hosting the site are quietly exchanging a massive amount of information. They're cooperating by following a really specific set of rules, and understanding those rules is basically the key to understanding your own digital security. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the postcard problem of HTTP, the locked package of HTTPS, the role of certificate authorities, the TLS secret handshake, and finally, the 3 pillars of HTTPS security. Let's get right to it. All right, section 1. Let's look at the early internet standard protocol, HTTP. So, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's essentially the fundamental set of rules dictating how data flows from your browser directly to a web server. When you type in a web address, your browser, acting as the client, sends an HTTP request asking for a page and the server sends it back. Pretty simple, right? Well, while this quick request and response cycle is awesome for fast loading speeds and reducing server load, it has a massive, literal, fatal flaw. It transmits all your information, like that bank's password we just talked about, completely exposed in plain text. To put that into perspective, using HTTP for a bank login is quite literally like writing your password on the back of a public postcard. Any nosy postal worker, or, in this case, any intercepted router on the internet can read exactly what you're sending. Early on in the web's history, when we were just reading static text pages, this wasn't a big deal at all. But today, it's a huge security hazard. Which brings us to section 2, where we introduce the modern solution to this whole postcard problem. HTTPS. The crucial takeaway here is that the S stands for secure. Rather than transmitting your data out in the open, HTTPS encrypts it. It acts like a locked package. If some eavesdropper manages to intercept your message while it's traveling across the web, all they're going to see is a scrambled, totally unreadable string of text, something like 5DF7X instead of your actual password. Only the intended recipient server has the proper key to unscramble that mess back into plain text. In this incredibly powerful encryption is driven by underlying cryptographic protocols known as SSL, Secure Sockets Layer, and its modern successor, TLS, Transport Layer Security. Think of these protocols as the invisible lock and key mechanisms that scramble and unscramble your data in transit. But hang on, this raises a really important question. If you're locking up your sensitive data for a specific server, how do you actually know that server is who it claims to be? Let's move to section 3 to find out. This is the role of certificate authorities. To make sure you aren't accidentally sending your encrypted password to some fake website designed to deceive you, the internet relies on certificate authorities, or CAs. You can basically think of a CA as the digital passport office of the web. They're trusted third-party entities that verify identity and issue digital certificates. So when your browser connects to a site, it checks this certificate first to verify a chain of trust before it ever agrees to hand over your data. For a website to actually get this digital passport, they have to go through a pretty strict process. First, the organization generates a certificate signing request, which contains their public key. Next, the certificate authority steps in and validates the organization's identity. Once they're verified, the CA creates and digitally signs the certificate using its own private key. And finally, the signed certificate is installed right on the web server. Now, the server has solid proof of its identity ready to show your browser. Okay, now that we have our trust established via the digital certificate, let's really lift the hood in section 4 and check out the TLS secret handshake. It's super interesting to note exactly where TLS lives in the network stack. It sits right between HTTP and the lower-level TCP. Because HTTP is a stateless protocol, every single time you make a secure connection, the data has to pass through this TLS layer. This is where the browser and server negotiate cryptographic algorithms and exchange secrets before any of your actual bulk data is transferred. This negotiation is called a handshake, and it happens in an absolute flash across 4 specific steps. First, the client sends a hello message, which includes a random number. The server fires back with its own hello, its own random number, and that digital certificate we just talked about. Your browser verifies the certificate and then generates a pre-master secret. It encrypts the secret using the server's public key, which it grabbed from the certificate, and sends it over. Now both sides use those random numbers in the secret to independently generate the exact same symmetric session key. From this point on, they use that shared session key to encrypt all the bulk data. When you look at the technical blueprint of this interaction, you can literally see the bytes of data flying back and forth. Client hello, server hello, the key exchange, and finally the finished messages. By using a heavy public key cryptography operation just once to safely share a secret, they can seamlessly switch over to a much faster encryption method for the heavy lifting of your actual data. Honestly, it's a brilliantly efficient system. All right, let's bring all this complex networking and cryptography back to what it actually means for you in our final section, the 3 pillars of HTTPS security. Whenever you have a successful HTTPS connection, you are absolutely guaranteed these 3 core pillars. First is confidentiality. Your data is scrambled, meaning eavesdroppers cannot read your private communications. Second is integrity. Through unique checksums generated during the transfer, the system guarantees your data hasn't been tampered with or altered in transit. And third is authentication. You know for a fact you are connected to your actual bank's legitimate website and not some hacker's imposter site. But look, in your everyday life, you obviously don't need to manually verify TLS handshakes or decode pre-master secrets. Just simply look for the small padlock icon next to the web address in your browser. That little padlock is your visual confirmation that HTTPS is working, that the site has a valid SSL certificate, and that your session is entirely encrypted. In fact, modern browsers like Chrome will explicitly warn you now if a site is not secure, meaning it's still using that old, vulnerable HTTP protocol. So, to wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this thought. The internet is an amazing place, but it definitely requires vigilance. Knowing exactly how vulnerable a plain-text HTTP connection is and how easily your digital postcards can be read by basically anyone, will you ever ignore a not-secure warning again? Always look for the padlock and browse with confidence knowing the invisible shield of HTTPS is working for you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.